Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us again. My name is Renee Robinson. I'm the programmer here at TIFF Industry, and this is our closing session for our co-production day. I know we had a full day starting out with Pierre-Emmanuel Florentin. We learned about the state of co-production, and then we learned about the Canada-EU co-pro process, and then we moved into talking to individual funds. We spoke to the BFI, to the CNC. We had our IndieWire session in the middle, and now joining me on stage is our co-production Treaties Lightning Talk. And the format of this is what we're going to do is each presenter will speak for about 10 minutes. We'll take a couple of maybe 2 questions from the audience, and then the next presenter will speak. We do have a very tight session, so we will have to keep very strictly on time. Mr. Julka has to get to the airport. So without further ado, our moderator today is Dave Forget from Telefilm Canada. Dave, all yours.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if lightning round means I'm meant to talk really fast, but we have, maybe I'll just start by introducing. I'm Dave Forget, Telefilm Canada, and I'm happy to report, because the subject of today's session is co-production treaties. It could also be TIFF brings you the world, because we have partner countries from literally all over the world, and it shows you the scope of international activity in production these days. So, and I'm also very pleased to be in a position to say that Canada has treaties now with all 3 of these countries, including India, which just was ratified in June and has come into effect. And so we're very eager to start those relations with India. And so my duty today is to introduce our speakers and have them give you a bit of an overview of their jurisdiction. And maybe I'll start with introducing Secretary Bimal Julka and give you maybe a quick little background. Sitting to my left, he's presently Secretary of Ministry of Information and Broadcast since 2013. He has led Indian delegation at various important international forums pertaining to media and entertainment sector. His futuristic vision at showcasing and popularizing diverse range of Indian cinema at Berlin, Cannes, and Goa has been particularly significant and noteworthy. Prior to this, he was Special Secretary and Financial Advisor in the Ministry of External Affairs, where a number of development partnership projects with various countries were expedited to strengthen diplomatic ties. As Director General, Directorate of Currency, Mr. Julka also led the government fight against fake currency. That would be an interesting topic. It's not today's topic, but as you can see, honestly, reading this, I wonder what I've done with my life, but without further ado, Secretary Julka, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Dave, and thanks, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great privilege and honor to be present here amongst all of you. Well, we have just signed the co-production treaty, which was pending for a long time with Canada. After a number of years of deliberations, consultations, and with the help of High Commission of Canada in India, as well as our own High Commission here, we have been able to actually sign this treaty. And I'm glad that while sitting here, we are very proud that this treaty is now set to just take off. As far as media and entertainment sector is concerned, I think I must give you an overview that this sector is moving at a very fast pace. The rapid digitization which is taking place in all sectors, whether it's print media, electronic media, or the film sector, there is a rapid growth which is happening in India. And there is an emerging and aspirational youth which is coming into this sector. So this is providing immense opportunities for employment for the future generation. So as an enabler, as facilitator, the government's role is basically to ensure that the regulatory framework is in place and people are able to work for themselves. Today, our focus is basically on co-production opportunities in India and the single window clearance for film shootings. As I mentioned, that the theatrical revenue has grown phenomenally over the last few years. The print media is growing at 9%, the electronic media at about 12%, And it's anticipated that the film industry itself will grow roughly about 15 to 17%. Leave alone the digital India, which is now happening in India these days. The expected revenue growth through the digital medium is almost of the rate of about 27 to 30%. So despite the economic meltdown which many countries experienced in the recent past, I think this sector is the one which has really grown at a very rapid pace. The number of digital cinemas in India is increasing. The focus is now shifting away from the metropolitan cities to the regional areas, the tier 2 and tier 3 cities with population of 1 million and below. And there are about 14,000 screens already established, and the digital screens are increasing day by day. So the real estate sector is also thriving on this growth in this area. Merchandising, VOD, this is the video on demand. These are the trends which are now being experienced in India. And 90 to 95% screens are already digitized. This is evident in the report which has been published recently by FICCI KPMG report of 2014. The foreign films shooting in India is increasing very rapidly. You know that India is a beautiful country. There are land, rivers, hills, there are seas, and beautiful landscape is available, and excellent locations are there for shooting in India. And we welcome all the producers to come to India and shoot their expertise in India. The strong box office performance of Life of Pi, which was shot in Puducherry, and Slumdog Millionaire are the key examples, basically, which are noteworthy. Disney, Fox, Sony, Warner Brothers have co-production and distribution deals with domestic production houses, and I can assure you that this is increasing at amazingly high pace. Foreign film productions in India. These are some of the films which have already been produced in India. They have been shot in India, and you can see that these are some of the very key names which are figuring on the screens here. The Slumdog Millionaire, the Marigold Hotels, Mighty Heart. These are some of the films which have already been shot, and many more co-productions are already underway. India has already entered into co-production treaties with various countries: UK, Italy, Germany, Brazil, France, New Zealand, Poland, Spain. And Canada, which came into effect in July 2014. It was actually inked in February 2014, and I had the proud privilege of signing that treaty in front of the Prime Minister at that time. This treaty is a very wide-ranging treaty. There's a lot of flexibility which has been provided in this treaty. It's a comprehensive arrangement for television, audiovisual arrangements, films, etc. So animation, gaming, visual effects, everything is covered as a part of the treaty. Kindly bear with me that the drafts are always exchanged between the two diplomatic sides of the two countries. And India exchanged this draft with Canada. And through the diplomatic channels, we got this draft approved. And finally, the signature was done. So if at all you have any queries with regard to the issues which are not covered, so kindly don't blame us. We have to go through certain procedures. As far as co-productions are concerned, there is an increasing trend for international collaborations, and our own National Film Development Corporation is also producing its own films like Kissa, The Lunchbox, Arunodaya, which are under production. Kissa has already been picked up several awards at Toronto, Abu Dhabi Film Festivals, and several other festivals. Lunchbox has received various important, significant awards in Dubai, London, Iceland, Asia Pacific Film Festivals. Yash Raj Productions was co-produced, although not in India, but it was done in America. And Grace of Monaco, as you know, is one of the very important films which was premiered at Cannes. And it was a great experience to watch this film at Cannes. This is a small clip of the Lunchbox. I just thought you could have a view of how this film was shot.
आंटी डब्बा किसी और को चला गया लगता है
क्या?
आंटी ये थोड़ा अजीब नहीं है ये चिट्ठी विट्ठी
Dear Ila, the salt was fine today. The chili was a bit on a higher side.
तू हंस रही है क्या?
गुड मॉर्निंग सर, कैसे हैं आप?
एक बहुत पुरानी डायरी मिली।
Even I found something from many years ago.
आपको कुछ बताना है।
You won't believe what happened to me yesterday.
मैं अनाथ हूँ। अपना नाम भी मैंने खुद ही चुना।
बात करके जाती भी कहाँ? ऊंची बिल्डिंगों से कूदने को भी तो हिम्मत चाहिए ना।
Dear Ila, please don't think like that. Things are never as bad as they seem.
और मेरी अम्मी हमेशा कहा करे कि कभी-कभी गलत ट्रेन भी सही जगह पहुंचा देती है।
Well, that was the film, which won many awards, and it's still being distributed all over the world. The other co-productions are Beyond the Known World. Now, that's a film which is upcoming film. We are in touch with our New Zealand partners, and they want to shoot this movie in India. Kabliwala is another production which is based on the story of Rabindranath Tagore, our old poet. And we had some discussions at the Cannes Festival with the director Atiq Rahimi, and they are almost conceptualizing this entire story, and they would be starting the production very soon. Bridge Forever is based on the life of Dr. Kotnis with China. This is also, the cast is Indian and Chinese, and that is also under consideration very actively. Gold Stuck with China with the Chinese cast as well as the Indian cast, that is also under active consideration for co-productions. As far as the shooting in India is concerned, there has always been criticism that the Indian bureaucracy takes a very long time for getting the clearances done. I do appreciate that in an environment where you have to be a little more careful, you have to go through certain administrative procedures. I am sure that all the countries have their own processes and procedures which are in place, but we are trying to streamline this whole process. At the central level, the INB ministry, basically my colleague, they look at the script, they look at the different aspects of the script, and then they grant permission for location and clue clearance, which is given by Ministry of Home Affairs. Our missions abroad are issuing visas based on the permission which is accorded by Ministry of Information and Broadcasting. There are other permissions, of course, like Railway Ministry for train stations, aerial photography, airports, Ministry of Civil Aviation and Ministry of Defense, and we liaise with them very actively so that those permissions are given at a faster pace. There are historical sites, Archaeological Survey of India and Ministry of Culture is involved. So all those multiplicity of agencies which are involved in grant of clearances, that is an area of concern for all of us. And some of you had raised this issue during our recent discussions in the last 2-3 days. Now, what was the way forward? In last July, we started this endeavor to streamline the whole system, and we started with a single window clearance mechanism. We had consultations with different ministries. It was a long, lengthy, arduous process. We went through that process, got everybody together, the Foreign Ministry, the Home Ministry, the Railway Ministry, so that we could discuss and thrash out all the issues and we could move forward. The key ministries have already been on board. We have discussed with them, and the single window mechanism and the standard operating procedures for the single window mechanism have already been established. We propose that we should be granting clearances in 30 to 45 days. But let me tell you and reassure you that in the last 6 to 8 months, I have yet to receive any complaint where the permissions have not been granted. So much to talk about the bureaucracy, despite the fact that we keep bashed every day. The entire process, we are trying to make it online so that we can move faster in this regard. The benefits of single window clearance, we are already aware. It basically boosts the tourism industry, which is very active. It boosts local film production, creation of employment opportunities, which are immense in this sector. Benefits to the economy, as I already mentioned, that this sector already is growing at the rate of about 10 to 12%. Technological exchange, with the fast-moving digitization which is happening, now there is a lot of exchanges which are taking place, and we have about 214 million young entrepreneurs who have got into the digital arena. And this growth is taking place at the rate of about 30%. So 1.2 billion population, we have about 200 odd million people who are already on the digital platform. There are cultural exchanges which take place. And This is basically, it's the greatest soft power of getting people together, getting the relationships cemented, and getting us to talk to each other and develop strong bonds. This, in a nutshell, is the overall approach which the Government of India is following. Let me use this opportunity to thank all of you for this very patient hearing. And I can assure you on behalf of the bureaucracy of Government of India that let's be sure that there won't be any impediments as well as co-productions are concerned. And we look forward to many more proposals from Canada and from other countries with whom we have signed treaties to produce their films in India. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Speaking as a bureaucrat, I could identify with a lot of that. And just as is apropos of nothing, but well, it's not nothing, but just maybe a small note, for the Canadians in the room, the ratification of the treaty came into effect on July 1st, which is, of course, our national holiday. So another reason to celebrate. We have time, perhaps, I mean, we're already, well, we have 3 speakers that we for sure want to hear from. We might have time for one question, and we will try to leave time at the end, time permitting, if there are some. So do we have a question, sir?
I have a question. I think it may apply to everybody, but
Let's wait for the mic so we get it on. We get you on the record.
so if we have a small, either Canada or U.S.-based production company, are we required to have a co-production company from India? I think the answer is yes. And if so, how do we find them? How do you match them up?
Basically what happens is that if you want to find a co-producer in India, you have to just send the script to us. Send us the script, we'll have it circulated amongst the film industry, and maybe we can marry the two and get you a partner there. That's how the whole thing proceeds. And in the past, it's been a very successful experiment. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Sally Kaplan. Sally is the head of production at Screen Australia. She started her career in distribution at Polygram, Universal, Momentum Pictures. As a former distributor, so the Kindred Spirit, worked at the UK Film Council, managing their premier fund for a number of years, and now finds herself on the other side of the world, helping to make great films in Australia. So,
Okay. Can I just say that Lunchbox was one of my favourite films of the year, and if you haven't seen it, go. It's really good. Not as good as Australian films, but pretty close. Thanks very much for inviting me, by the way, and it's actually quite timely. Australia has a history of co-production. We've done about 130 since our first treaty. We're actually, at the moment, in the process of amending our guidelines just to make it even easier than it was to apply and to make sure that everything goes smoothly for you. Why film in Australia? Weather's a good reason. We can give you all kinds of weather. I arrived from the UK 6 months ago and was launched into a Sydney so-called winter, and everybody in the office was suddenly wearing big coats and hats, and I was still with my little jacket. And they were saying, well, you know, aren't you cold? And I was saying, no, not really. And they were saying, but it's going under 20 degrees today. So I'm sure all you Canadians will sympathise with that. But we can give you snow, and we can give you desert, and we can give you rainforests, and pretty much anything you want in terms of locations. We have really, really strong crews. If you look at some of the films that have been shot in Australia, and we've done anything from little indies to big films like The Great Gatsby. So we've got fantastic stages, studios, crew, depth of crews, very skilled crews. We've got water tanks, great post houses. Some of you may have heard of Animal Logic, which did the Lego movie, and if any of you have seen that Lego movie, it's currently my favourite song because I listened to it on the plane, and it's called Everything is Awesome. And that's why I'd say film in Australia. We have co-pros with 11 countries. I won't run through them all because it will be boring and I'll probably get it wrong anyway. But obviously Canada and India and UK are prime ones. We don't have one with Colombia yet, but we can talk afterwards if you want, Claudia. Might make sense. We've also got 4 in negotiation at the moment as well. The other thing to bear in mind is that although we haven't got nearly as many co-production treaties as Canada, because I don't think anybody has, have they, Dave? How many have you got? Don't.
54.
That's hard to compete with.
We're good at something, treaties.
But it's worth worth remembering that you can do multi-partite co-productions, which I wouldn't necessarily advise. They can be very complicated and legally demanding. But if it works for the project, and we have done a few, then it makes a lot of sense. And the advantage is that each party has to be connected, but you can use somebody else. So, for example, if it was, we have a treaty with China, we don't have a treaty with Brazil, but we could do it in a way that's connected. So if China has a treaty with Brazil, which I don't think they do, so the UK would probably have been a better example. We have a treaty with the UK have a treaty with Brazil, we can do it that way, even though we're not directly connected. If we are directly connected, that can work quite well.
We have treaties with all those countries.
I know. I give up. Just go to Canada. Just don't bother with Australia. The advantage of doing a co-production with Australia is, apart from what I've told you about the crews, the locations, everything else, one of the most important advantages I'm going to get to now is the offset. I don't know how much you know about the offset. It's worth up to 40%. That will be based on the Australian spend, of course, which is understandable. We can't, not like the UK in the good old days, where the tax credit there was based on the entire budget, irrespective of where it's spent, and nearly bankrupted the Treasury. So you can get up to 40%, and it's not capped. And I think that's a rare thing, and it's a very generous subsidy. The other advantage is that normally to qualify for that offset, you have to prove significant Australian content, which I won't go into details with, because the great news is if you're a co-production, you don't have to qualify. You don't have to prove that significant Australian content. So you can have almost any subject matter. Obviously, underlying it to qualify for the co-production, there has to be an Australian element. But it doesn't really matter what it looks like or whether it actually passes that particular test. Some examples of co-productions that illustrate that are, for example, Kate Shortland's Law, which, if any of you have seen, that was an Australian-German co-production. It's actually German language. And if you just look at that film, there is nothing that would tell you that it's got any connection to Australia. But if you look underneath, which is what counts and is what made it qualify as a co-production, obviously there's a lot of Australian talent behind that particular film. Likewise, with The Railway Man, starring Colin Firth and Nicole Kidman, doesn't look anything very Australian about that, apart from Nicole, but that did qualify. The other advantages is that if you qualify as an official co-production, you would be entitled to apply to, or your Australian producer would be entitled to apply for equity from Screen Australia, or indeed if the amount was under 500,000 Australian dollars, we now give that as a grant. It's not even a loan that has to be repaid. It's not our equity, it's yours. We just did that because it's a big benefit to the production industry, and frankly it simplifies a lot of our administration and a lot of the legal work. You might also be entitled, or your Australian producer can certainly apply to the state agencies. There are 5 in Australia, and if you carry out certain shooting or post-production in their territories, they will look favourably at giving you a grant or equity. So, how do you go about setting up an Australian co-production? This may sound stupid, but first of all, make sure your country has a territory with Australia that covers the type of screen content you're making. Some of the treaties, for example, are limited, like China, for example, is limited to feature films and telemovies, but not television. Whereas Australia, in general, we cover TV, and all kinds of feature films, documentaries would qualify for our offset and also as a co-production. Then the next thing is you need to find an Australian producer. It has to be somebody it can be foreign owned, but it has to have permanent residency in Australia and an Australian business number. And going to this gentleman's question here, we can give you help in finding a suitable co-producing partner. I mean, I often say, look at some Australian films that you like or you admire or you think are similar to yours, and then check backwards who's the producer on that. But obviously we're very happy to try and help you where necessary. Then, without going into too much detail, because it's late in the afternoon, you will fall asleep, there has to be a minimum contribution under most treaties. Most of our treaties are now 20%, so you could just have a financial contribution of 20% coming from Australia. Other treaties are 30%, but it's moving towards the 20%. Once you've got your financial contribution organised with your partner, there is also a rule comes under most treaties that the creative contribution must be roughly equal to the finance. So if you're putting in 50% of the finance, or your Australian partner is raising, say, 50% of the finance, which would include things like the offset and local DGs for local distribution, your creative content, otherwise it might be arguable it's not a true co-production, should be about 50%. We're flexible. We allow a little bit of leeway. It's very easy to work out. There's a points test, and again, I won't go through that, but obviously it covers the key creatives, also where it's shot, underlying works, and things of that nature. So I think really I don't have much more to add other than to also mention another organisation in Australia called Ozfilm, which I think a lot of territories have equivalent to. They are very committed to bringing in productions into Australia to shoot there, and they can give you a lot of help with co-productions and locations and just facilities and where to go and how to do things and what permits to get and to help you with all those kind of things. In order to qualify as a Australian co-production, unfortunately, we're trying to make it simpler. There is some paperwork. In the first instance, and this is one of the changes that's coming through probably in early October, so all in good time for any co-productions you were thinking of doing. Yes, you have to fill in a form. You submit it to our producer offset and co-production department for provisional approval. What you need to show them at that stage is fairly flexible, but it's fairly obvious in things you need to say who your co-production partner is, who are the nationalities of the participators, key crew. You have to have a draft. It doesn't have to be signed or agreed co-production agreement so that we can see that it would fit into the structure. You also have to have a finance plan. It doesn't have to be secured or committed, just to show, oops, was that ominous? To show how the finance plan would work so that the department can assess the contributions and make sure that's all in order. And finally, there is a chain of title, as there always is for everything. They will then assess that. And by the way, before you do that, if you need any help or assistance, they are the most amazingly helpful department, and they want you to call them so that to help you get it right. They will then, within about, it varies, perhaps 6 weeks of all the relevant materials being submitted, give you a provisional approval certificate, all being well. At the point that the film is completed, you will then have to apply for final approval. And the good news is, of those 130 co-productions, I'm told that in every case where provisional approval was given, final approval was also given. So that seems to be working quite well. So that on that happy note, all I would say is that everything is awesome. Come and do co-productions in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, that was awesome. Maybe we have time for one question, and there will be time permitting questions at the end, but if you have something you'd like to ask Sally now. If not, we can, yes, sir.
Is the expenditure solely on labor, or is there a division of the recoupment of the taxes, like on labor or on CGI or?
Sorry, is that
The offset.
The provision?
Correct.
It's on the wonderfully named QAPE. Only the Australians use Q without a U coming after it, but that's qualifying Australian production expenditure. It's very broad. It covers pretty much everything that's spent in Australia, the only exception of financing charges. You can even get above the line. There is a cap on that, but basically it's everything. It's goods, services, labour, crew, salaries, post-production, visual effects, a lot. Yeah.
It's like the turbo tax credit. It's, so our last but not least, surely not least, our last speaker, Claudia Triana, she promised in advance to forgive me for mispronouncing. Proimágenes Colombia is the name of the agency. Claudia began her career as director of the Bogota Cinematheque, fostered the creation of the National Film Archive, and since 1998 has been the director of Proimágenes Colombia, which is, I would describe as a sister agency to Telephone Canada, given that our mandates are very similar in terms of managing investments in feature film. So without further ado, Claudia.
I don't know which way. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for being the third, because we are the maybe the earliest industry. We cannot compare with, to my right, to India that does a lot of films, and nor to Australia that they have enormous skills, as you said. Maybe it's too expensive there, but that's the bad news, you know. But what we're been doing in the last 15, 16 years is in Colombia is to create the whole system of incentives to improve our production, because in 2003, for instance, we had like 1, 2, 3 films, and now we have a steady production of 20 to 22 films that are being released, local films. And parallel to that, we have been having companies and creators and directors. So from 2007, we have been steadily support and international promotion for not only our films, but also our people and our crews. And lately, we started to create a film commission and a cash rebate, 40% for, to the local spend in services in Colombia. So what Proimágenes have done, we are a little strange because we are a nonprofit private organization that was created in 1998 in the same law that was created the Ministry of Culture and the Film Office. So the National Authority for Films is the Ministry of Culture, but we are sort of the brother nonprofit and private that works together with them for all the promotion and the support of the film industry and the preservation of films. So we started being a fund without funds, as sometimes happens, and we managed to do the first, what we call the film law in Colombia, that has in 2003, and we had there were 2 main tools that are important for this subject. I have to do like this. I'm sorry. That's only to see where's Colombia and a little scope. A little scope. I'm sorry, it's not India around or Australia. They're too far away. But in the area, in comparison with the way the way we can compare with the other countries. As I said, this film law give us 2 main tools. One, it's a fund that we in Proimágenes administrate, and it's a percentage of the income of the producers, exhibitors, and distributors. Mainly, their income comes from the tickets. So we recoup like around $10 million per year that we have to re-give in incentives to the production in a 70% and 30% in other matters. That's one tool. And the other one is that we have how to say that, private investors can deduct from their tax income, how to say that? The tax they have to pay for their incomes. Income tax. They can deduce up to 165%. That means that if you are going to invest in a project, and you can do it from the script to the release of the film in the Colombian territory, you can from 100, you can 41.25% it's going to be deduct of your taxes, but the rest, the producer have to be creative enough to show you the business. So with those two tools that we'll see, we have, advancing co-productions and productions in Colombia lately. We have bilateral agreements with France, with Canada since 2004. It's only for films, not for television, because in Colombia we have like the Ministry of Culture is the authority for cinema and films, but we have other authorities and the Ministry of maybe your Ministry of Communications, Information, the TICs, has to do with the television. So it's only for films, but unfortunately, we only have had one production, co-productions in all these years, in 10 years. So we also have, with an Ibero-American co-production agreement, there's 18 countries that participate in a fund that maybe some of you know. It's called Ibermedia, which is a fund that every country and Spain and Portugal gives, the authorities give some money each year, and within this fund, which the requirement is mainly to be a co-production, at least with 2 countries, it's another really important tool that has been from 1998 to do co-productions within the region. So mainly, we have done in this period more than 24 co-productions, but those co-productions are mainly with Spain and within this region. I was just hearing some of the conference in the other door, and someone was saying, okay, co-productions are tricky, co-productions are difficult, and they're not like the mine of finance. I mean, people are thinking, I have a project, I have to go to Australia, and they'll give me the money for my film. That's not the truth. I mean, you have to work a lot to do a co-production. The narrative and the story has to make sense. That's the difficult part, and that's why we haven't done things with Canada. The language is tricky too, because even though maybe you have a very interested Canadian producer wanting to know everything about Colombia, well, they have to deal with their own market, their own distributors. That's something that it's extincting, like animals, and distributors doesn't exist anymore, and they don't want to do nothing different of what they know that the market is going to be friendly with. And our productions and different independent films are not very friendly with the popular markets. So what we've done with your authorities, Telefilm Canada and OMC and SODEC lately, last 2 years, is to try to put together our producers, your producers, sales agents on our projects, etc. We do it 2 times a year, once in Cartagena during the International Film Festival in March, and then in the BAM, which is the Bogota Audiovisual Market, it's in July. And 17 companies came from Canada, and then during TIFF last year we did like a meeting and a friendly breakfast, and then they came back 2014 to Colombia to have other meetings, and that's the real thing. I mean, to be friends, to have gimmick, to start constructing stories together and to start learning what's better about, So we have some films. I have to go faster. Okay. So, the technical part, you really have to have at least 20% of the equity. It has to be Colombian. You need some artistic and technical percentages. So if the director is not Colombian, you have to have at least 2 actors and some of the artistic skills and some technical. And it's different for documentary or animation or fiction. And we have these 2 funds that I told you about. But what I want also for you to see is how you can accede to the 40% rebate to film in Colombia. So there's a small video that you can see if technology helps. Thank you.
And the winner for Best Production Budget is you. Prepared to shoot in Colombia, because with the 1,556 law cash rebate 40/20, you receive a reimbursement of 40% in expenditures for film services and of 20% for film logistics services. For shooting in a country with a huge natural diversity, culturally rich, and surrounded by talent with the best technological resources. Sounds good, right? Let us explain this incentive in 4 steps. Step 1. The incentives. A reimbursement of 40% for services directly related with pre-production, production, and post-production hired through one or many Colombian film service companies will be given. In addition, a 20% reimbursement for hotels, food and catering, and transportation, including flights from overseas if bought from a Colombian travel agency. Step 2. Let's get started. You can apply with long feature films of 70 or more minutes, short films less than 70 minutes, and TV movies with TV broadcast of up to 2 episodes. Projects can be of any genre. Animation is included. Step 3. Budget figures. Around $600,000 is the minimum amount required by a project to spend in Colombia in film services and film logistics services. And finally, Step 4. The details. If your project is from abroad, remember that it is mandatory to hire a Colombian film services company. The following step is to put together all the documentation required. Applicant producer information, project information, information of expenses in Colombia, and the deposit of guarantee. Once all the documents are ready, send them to the Colombian Film Commission at Proimágenes Colombia. At this point, the evaluation process begins. If all documents are in order and the project is approved by the Colombian Film Promotion Committee, pack your bags. Note that the contract should be formalized at a maximum of 20 days after the project has been approved. You have up to 6 months to make the expenditures in Colombia if you only shoot in the country. If production and post-production activities are carried out, you have up to 12 months. Once the contract is signed, it is necessary to set up a trust fund to manage the resources with a minimum of 10% of the total expenditure to be done in Colombia. From this moment, you can start shooting your production. You must have an external auditor to verify that all expenses are made in compliance with the legal requirements. Once the spending period is over, you will have 3 months to submit the audit report, trustee report, the certificate by the Colombian Film Services Company, and other film reports to Proimágenes. The expected moment is near to come. You will receive your reimbursement within 2 months. Congratulations! And finally, please include the credit of the benefit received.
think we should make something like that at Telefilm. That's excellent. So maybe just thank you very much, Claudia. That was a really good overview, I think, and included in your presentation were some of the challenges to co-producing, finding the right partner, having it be related to the story that you're telling, not having it be purely about how things are being financed and wanting to maximize, although that's obviously a component of it. That's all really good advice. And in speaking about the work that we've been doing together, the two things that come to mind is to be, I guess, to remind ourselves that it's a business of relationships. Relationships, in particular those that are international, aren't created overnight. So opportunities for producers to get together and build those networks and build those relationships over time are exactly the way to go. So you need consistency and you need relationships, and that's the building block of those good international partnerships. I think we're almost out of time, but we might have time for one or two questions if you have something on your mind. And just to keep in mind too that we're also available at Telefilm if you have other questions or are seeking some guidance on working with some of the countries or where you can find information. We're happy to help with that too. So one or two questions maybe? Yes, ma'am?
Hi, Claudia. I'm Colombiana. Really happy to hear this. Actually, I'm a citizen of Canada and the US and Colombia. And I was listening to this and I was trying to figure out, this applies only to the partners you mentioned for bilateral agreements, or does it apply to other countries like the US as well?
You can, in Colombia, you can do an official co-production or a non-official co-production, but you can, if you want to be a co-production and accede to our incentives, you have to be official, you know? But you can do, of course you can do whatever, but you can, if you apply, you have to apply through our Colombian, to our fund, but we have selective and, how do you say, immediate, how do you say, non-selective incentives, but he's the one, the Colombian is the one who submit the project, and it can be a co-production that at least has 20% and all I said, but you can have the fund, which is a non-reimbursable in different categories, and you can also have Colombian investors in your project. That's one path. If you're going to choose the other path, which is the 40%, they're not together, you know, you have to take this way or the other. But you always need a Colombian one to submit the project for the co-production with this law, and in the other, you need a Colombian service.
Great. I think we might be out of time. I think that might complete our tour of the world this afternoon. Who said you couldn't go to Colombia, Australia, and India in 45 minutes? I'd like to take the opportunity first to thank you all for coming and your participation, and of course to our panelists. I've learned a lot today. I hope you did too. Thank you very much. You've come a long way to participate, and we greatly appreciate it.